Okay, imagine this for a second. You're a king. Your life, your entire kingdom, it all hinges on the people in your inner circle. Just one bad apple, one disloyal advisor, one greedy treasurer, and the whole thing could just crumble. So how do you make sure your team is absolutely 100% loyal? Well, about 2,000 years ago, an Indian strategist named Kautilya came up with what might be the most intense, most paranoid, and maybe the most brilliant hiring process ever created. So let's put ourselves in the king's shoes, right? The problem seems straightforward, but the stakes couldn't be higher. You have to find the perfect minister. And we're not just talking about someone who's good at their job. We're talking about someone you can literally trust with your life. So where do you even start? Well, you start with the resume, of course, and according to Kautilya's masterwork, the Arthashastra, the checklist is pretty demanding. You're looking for an absolute superstar, someone from a noble family, trained in everything, smart, well-spoken, brave, loyal. You get the picture. It's basically the resume of the perfect executive. And let's say, miraculously, you find someone who ticks every single one of these boxes. They just crush the interview. You've done your background checks, you've tested their skills, and their reputation is flawless. So you make the offer. They accept, and just like that, they're a minister in your government. But here's the twist. This is where Kautilya's real genius, or maybe his paranoia, kicks in. See, that whole interview process, that was just the preliminary screening. The job offer, that was just the ticket to get in the door. Because now that they're on the inside, the real evaluation starts, and it all happens in secret. Kautilya calls this process Upadha. Now, this is not your normal 90-day review. A better way to think of it is a series of undercover sting operations. Each one is carefully crafted to test a specific human weakness, their religious conviction, their greed, their lust, and their fear. The whole point is to find the breaking point of your most trusted officials. And that brings us to the heart of it all. Kautilya lays out 4 very specific traps, a whole gauntlet of temptation and terror that every single minister has to go through without even knowing it. Let's break them down one by one. First up is a test of devotion, but is the minister loyal to a higher power or loyal to you, the king? This is the Piety Test, the Dharmopadita. It's basically a showdown between faith and state. So here's how the sting works. It's a bit of political theater, really. The king puts on a big public show of firing his top religious advisor, claiming the priest is impious. Then that same priest secretly goes to our minister and tries to recruit him for a holy crusade against the unrighteous king. If the minister says no, he proves his loyalty is to the kingdom. Above all else, he passes. All right, next up, Kautilya goes after a weakness that's as old as time itself, money. The greed test, or Arthashastra, is a very direct test of a minister's financial honesty. Can they be bought? The setup is pretty similar. Another top official, this time the chief of defense, gets publicly fired. Then he goes to the minister, but instead of appealing to religion, he offers him a gigantic pile of cash to help kill the king. It's a simple question, really. Does this minister have a price? If he refuses the money, he proves he's clean. The third test, well, this one gets really personal. It's called the Kamopada, the lust test. It's designed to see if a minister can be compromised by his desires. It's a classic honey trap, but with a twist that is just unthinkable. This just shows you how far Kautilya was willing to go. A female spy gets close to the minister, earns his trust, and then she drops a bombshell. The queen herself, is secretly in love with him. The spy promises a secret meeting and a fortune if he'll just go along with it. The bait isn't just some random person, it's the queen. If he turns this down, it proves his self-control is rock solid. And that brings us to the final test, the Upadha, the fear test. How does your minister act when his career, his freedom, maybe even his life, is suddenly on the line? Does he crack under pressure and turn on you? This one is just pure psychological warfare. The minister is invited to what he thinks is a party, but then he's suddenly arrested and thrown in jail on some fake conspiracy charge. And in the cell with him, another agent, pretending to be a fellow prisoner, who tries to fuel his anger. He's saying, look, the king is a tyrant. Our only way out is to plot against him. A minister who refuses even when he thinks his life is over proves he is unbelievably steadfast. So what happens if they fail? Are they fired on the spot? Exiled? Worse? Well, the answer is the most chillingly practical part of this whole system. See, this was never about punishing people. It was about collecting data for strategic job placement. Kautilya wasn't trying to find reasons to get rid of people. He was trying to figure out their specific weaknesses so he could put them in jobs where those weaknesses wouldn't hurt the kingdom. Pass the piety test? Great. You're perfect for the Justice Department. Pass the greed test? You're our new treasurer. Pass the lust test? You can be in charge of entertainment. The fear test? Welcome to the personal royal guard. Only the person who passed all 4 tests could be prime minister. And the guys who failed every single one? They didn't get fired. They were sent to manage the mines or the forest. Tough jobs, far, far away from any real power. But just when you're thinking Kautilya is the most cynical political mind in history, he drops a huge, surprising warning. Even the guy who invented this whole system of paranoia, he knew exactly how dangerous it was. He actually wrote, and I'm quoting here, "He shall not corrupt the uncorrupted." That would be like adding poison to water. Kautilya himself is warning the king not to use these tests on someone who is truly innocent. He knew that once you introduce that kind of poison into someone's character, you might never be able to get it out. He understood that his own methods were a kind of necessary evil, and a dangerous one at that. Which really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Is this a manual for brilliant leadership? A ruthless but maybe effective way to build a government that can't be corrupted? Or is it just the recipe for the most toxic workplace imaginable, where nobody trusts anyone and everyone is secretly being manipulated? The real answer, just like the Arthashastra itself, is probably somewhere in the middle.